Imagine being born into a world where your freedom is taken before you even have a chance to understand what it means. Imagine living in a place where every part of your life, every choice you could have made, is dictated by someone else's greed and desire for power. This was the reality for Roque José Florencio, better known as Pata Seca, a man whose story has been all but forgotten by history. Born in 1828 in the Brazilian state of São Paulo, Roque was thrust into a life of unimaginable hardship from the very beginning. From a young age, he was separated from his family, never to see them again. The society into which he was born considered people like him property, tools to be used for labor, reproduction, and economic profit. Pata Seca was singled out for his extraordinary physical strength, towering stature, and remarkable resilience. These qualities, which in another world might have brought admiration or respect, in his case made him a target for one of the most brutal aspects of slavery, being forced into the role of a breeding slave. His purpose was not to live freely or pursue his own dreams, it was to ensure the survival and growth of the slave labor force through the children he would father. Yet, as oppressive as his circumstances were, Pata Seca's story is not just one of suffering, it is also one of resistance, intelligence, and remarkable resilience. While he endured the weight of a system designed to dehumanize him, he found ways to preserve his dignity, to fight for his own survival, and to pass on knowledge and skills to the next generation. Through his courage and determination, he became a living testament to the strength of the human spirit, a figure who refused to be defined solely by the chains that bound him. In this video, we will explore not just the hardships Pata Seca faced, but also the incredible ways he resisted oppression, taught his children to survive, and left a legacy that echoes through generations. We will delve into the historical context of 19th century Brazil, the brutal realities of slavery, and the extraordinary life of a man who, despite unimaginable constraints, became a symbol of perseverance and resilience. As we uncover this hidden chapter of history, we invite you to reflect on the strength, courage, and determination of those who endured in the face of extreme injustice. Their stories remind us of the importance of remembering and honoring lives that history has often overlooked. If you find this story compelling and want to help keep these important histories alive, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more untold stories from the past. By supporting this channel, you are helping bring forgotten stories like Pata Seca's into the light, inspiring new generations to learn, reflect, and never forget. Welcome to the untold story of Pata Seca, a story of struggle, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. As Pata Seca grew into a man, his extraordinary size and strength became both a blessing and a curse, marking him as uniquely valuable in the eyes of the plantation owners who controlled every aspect of his life. In a society where human beings were reduced to property and measured for their usefulness, Roque José Florencio's physical prowess made him more than just a laborer. It made him a tool for sustaining the very system that sought to strip him of his humanity. From a young age, he was already aware that his life would not follow the ordinary rhythms of family, community, or personal choice. Instead, it would be dictated by a relentless demand for labor and, more disturbingly, for reproduction, as he was forced into the role of a breeding slave, a cruel position that turned his body into a means for maintaining the plantation economy. The sheer scale of what Pata Seca endured is almost impossible to comprehend. Over the course of his life, he fathered approximately 249 children with different enslaved women, each union arranged or coursed under the watchful eyes of overseers who treated human life as currency. Every child born was another worker to be trained, another laborer to feed the insatiable appetite of the plantations, another link in a chain that stretched from the fields to the markets, and ultimately to the wealth of their owners. Yet, Within this system designed to erase individuality and personal agency, Pata Seca found ways to assert himself, however subtly, and to protect fragments of humanity wherever he could. Despite the dehumanizing conditions, he became more than a vessel for the plantation's economic ambitions. Oral histories passed down through generations tell of a man who, even while forced into the unimaginable role of producing hundreds of children, sought to educate them in the skills that would allow them to survive, resist, and retain a sense of self. He taught his children to read when he could, to navigate the harsh realities of slavery, and to understand the value of courage and strategy in the pursuit of freedom. In this way, he transformed what could have been a purely exploitative existence into an opportunity to foster resilience and knowledge in the next generation, leaving a legacy that was as much about survival and resistance as it was about biological reproduction. The plantation system in Brazil at that time was particularly brutal in its efficiency, and Pata Seca's life exemplifies the extremes to which it would go. Enslaved women were often separated from their children shortly after birth, while the children themselves were raised under strict supervision, taught only what their masters deemed necessary, and groomed for labor from a young age. Pata Seca witnessed this cycle firsthand, yet he found ways to intervene where possible, guiding his children with quiet instruction, stories of resilience, and practical knowledge for enduring hardship. Each lesson he imparted was a small act of defiance, a subtle assertion of human dignity in the face of a system that sought to remove it entirely. Even as he fathered hundreds of children, Pata Seca's own personal life remained constrained and closely monitored. Relationships were dictated by necessity and caution. Yet within these confines, he managed to carve out moments of connection and protection for those under his care. The plantation's relentless demands never fully extinguished his capacity for thought, reflection, or affection. Historical accounts, supported by family stories and surviving documents, suggest that he maintained a deep sense of responsibility toward his children, whether they were born into the coercive circumstances of slavery or later within his own family life after he married Palmyra, a skilled healer and partner who would help nurture and care for his children. The weight of fathering so many children under such circumstances cannot be overstated. Each life created in this manner carried the potential for suffering, illness, and a future constrained by slavery, yet it also carried the seeds of resilience, community, and resistance. Pata Seca's children were not merely extensions of the plantation's workforce. Through his guidance, many became leaders within their own communities, educators, and keepers of knowledge that transcended the oppressive boundaries of the plantation. The story of one man fathering hundreds of children becomes, when viewed through this lens, a story of survival, adaptation, and the persistent assertion of human agency even under extreme coercion. Throughout his life, Pata Seca navigated the contradictions of existence under slavery. He was both exploited and enduringly influential, both a tool of the plantation economy and a subtle architect of resistance and continuity. His extraordinary physical presence made him a target for exploitation, but his intellect, courage, and foresight allowed him to transform that exploitation into something that could benefit the lives of those around him, creating a lasting impact that would ripple through generations. The story of Pata Seca, when told in full, is not only about the horrors of forced reproduction and systemic oppression, but also about the ways in which human resilience can manifest even in the most constrained and brutal circumstances. In exploring this chapter of history, it becomes clear that Pata Seca's life is emblematic of both the cruelty and the endurance of the human spirit. He lived as a father to hundreds, a teacher to many, and a silent resistor to the system that sought to reduce him to mere utility. His legacy challenges us to consider the depth of human resilience, the courage required to protect knowledge and family under oppression, and the ways in which one person's life can shape the futures of countless others. By understanding the scope of his experience, we gain not only insight into the brutal realities of 19th-century Brazilian slavery, but also a profound appreciation for the extraordinary perseverance of individuals who refused to be wholly defined by the chains imposed upon them. To understand the extraordinary life of Pata Seca, one must first grasp the vast scale and brutality of the system into which he was born. For his personal story is inseparable from the broader context of Brazilian slavery in the 19th century. Brazil was not merely a nation that tolerated slavery. It was a society built upon it, where the labor of enslaved Africans formed the backbone of the economy, sustained agriculture, and enabled the wealth of its elite. Around 40% of all Africans forcibly brought to the Americas were sent to Brazil, a staggering number that illustrates just how deeply embedded slavery was in the nation's growth and prosperity. For centuries, plantations thrived on this coarse labor, producing coffee, sugar, and other commodities that fed not only local markets but also global trade, making Brazil one of the largest recipients of human cargo in the transatlantic slave trade. Within this system, every enslaved person was considered a commodity. Their bodies, labor, and even reproductive capabilities reduced to tools of economic production. And Pata Seca's life exemplifies both the dehumanization and the resilience that occurred within this oppressive structure. The plantations of Brazil were vast enterprises, stretching over fertile lands where enslaved men and women worked from sunrise to sunset, cultivating crops that would enrich their owners while leaving the laborers with little more than exhaustion, inadequate food, and the ever-present threat of punishment. Enslaved people were denied basic freedoms, forcibly separated from families, and subject to laws that treated them as property rather than human beings. In this environment, Pata Seca was singled out not only for his extraordinary physical presence towering above most men, his muscles honed from years of grueling labor, but also for the way plantation owners saw in him the potential to perpetuate the system itself. It was not enough for him to work the fields. He was assigned the impossible role of a breeding slave, a designation that reduced him to a generator of human capital, expected to father children who would replace older laborers and ensure the continuity of the plantation economy. Understanding Brazil's dependence on slave labor provides critical insight into why individuals like Pata Seca were targeted for such exploitation. The economy could not function without the constant supply of enslaved people to till the land, harvest crops, and perform the myriad tasks required to sustain production. White landowners relied on the enforced reproduction of enslaved men and women to maintain a labor force capable of meeting ever-growing demands. In this system, human life was commodified to an extraordinary degree, with Pata Seca becoming both a victim and a central figure in the perpetuation of that system. Forced to father hundreds of children under conditions designed to strip him of autonomy and dignity. The very skills and physical attributes that made him remarkable in another context became instruments of oppression. Yet they also allowed him to navigate, resist, and endure in ways that others could not. Amidst this oppressive structure, the broader social and economic environment in Brazil intensified the severity of slavery. The plantation system depended not only on labor, but also on strict control of knowledge, movement, and community among enslaved people. Families were torn apart, oral histories were fragmented, and education was largely denied, leaving enslaved individuals vulnerable yet also fostering pockets of resistance and ingenuity. Pata Seca, despite being coerced into fathering hundreds of children, managed to teach his offspring survival skills, reading, and strategies for navigating a world designed to keep them subjugated. His efforts created small, quiet networks of empowerment, defying the plantation's attempts to control every aspect of his life and demonstrating that even within a system designed to dehumanize, resilience and agency could survive. The demand for labor in Brazil also sheds light on the extraordinary human cost behind the country's economic prosperity. Slaves worked in extreme conditions, often suffering from malnutrition, disease, and exhaustion. With mortality rates alarmingly high, children born into slavery were trained from an early age to become productive, often separated from parents and molded to meet the expectations of their owners. In this environment, the role of someone like Pata Seca was not incidental. It was a deliberate strategy to maintain control and maximize profits. His life, therefore, cannot be separated from the larger economic and social framework of Brazilian slavery, which prioritized productivity and profit over human dignity, making his acts of resistance, teaching, and family care all the more extraordinary. Brazil's dependence on slave labor also created a society in which race, power, and wealth were inextricably linked, shaping the lives of everyone within it. Enslaved Africans and their descendants faced systemic oppression that affected every aspect of existence, from where they could live and work to how they could marry, reproduce, and build communities. Within this rigid hierarchy, Pata Seca's remarkable physical and intellectual abilities gave him a unique, though constrained, position. He became a figure around whom survival strategies, resistance narratives, and family networks coalesced, and his story illustrates the complex ways in which individuals navigated the interplay between oppression and agency. By situating Pata Seca's life within the context of Brazil's reliance on slave labor, we can better understand the profound pressures he faced and the extraordinary ways he responded. His fathering of hundreds of children was not a personal choice, but a reflection of a society that measured human worth by labor and reproduction. Yet within these constraints, he carved out spaces of teaching, protection, and community building. His life offers a lens through which to view not only the brutality of Brazilian slavery but also the resilience, intelligence, and courage of those who survived within it, leaving a legacy that resonates far beyond the plantation fields. In exploring the scale and dependence of Brazil's slave economy, we recognize that the story of Pata Seca is both deeply personal and broadly historical, a narrative that captures the cruelty of systemic exploitation and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Through understanding the societal forces that shaped his life, we gain insight into how one man navigated extraordinary circumstances, resisted dehumanization, and left a legacy that continues to echo through the generations of his descendants and the communities he influenced. Life under the Brazilian plantation system was a daily struggle for survival, a relentless rhythm of labor, deprivation, and fear that defined the existence of every enslaved person, from the moment they awoke before sunrise. Enslaved men, women, and children were thrust into back-breaking work in the fields, cultivating crops like coffee, sugar, and cotton that would enrich plantation owners while leaving them with little more than exhaustion and hunger. For someone like Pata Seca, towering above most men with an imposing strength, the work demanded of him was even more intense. Yet his physical prowess did not spare him from the harsh realities of being treated as property, rather than a human being. The plantation was a machine designed to extract labor and profit at any cost, where every action was monitored, every movement controlled, and any sign of resistance met with punishment. Hunger was a constant companion in this life, with minimal rations of food that barely sustained the grueling labor required each day. Enslaved people were fed just enough to continue working, their diets lacking in nutrition, variety, and sustenance, often consisting of cornmeal, beans, and occasional scraps of meat. With little regard for their health or well-being, malnutrition weakened bodies, made them more susceptible to disease, and heightened the sense of vulnerability that permeated every aspect of life on the plantation. For Pata Seca, this scarcity was a stark contrast to his enormous physical demands. Even his strength could not protect him from the weariness, illness, and injury that accompanied each day in the fields. Yet he endured, pushing forward under circumstances that would have broken many others. Family separation was another cruel element of the system, tearing apart bonds that might have offered comfort and hope. Children were often taken from their parents shortly after birth, sent to work elsewhere or raised under strict supervision, while spouses and siblings were frequently sold to different plantations, severing connections and leaving emotional scars that could last a lifetime. Pata Seca himself was separated from his parents at a very young age, never to see them again, an experience that shaped his understanding of loss and survival from the outset. The pain of these separations was compounded by the knowledge that the very children he fathered, sometimes hundreds over the course of his life, would be subject to the same cruel practices. Often raised under the control of the plantation, rather than within the nurturing environment of family. Yet, within this oppressive structure, Pata Seca found ways to instill knowledge, resilience, and practical survival skills in his children, creating a form of legacy that resisted total dehumanization, even as the system sought to control every aspect of their lives. Forced reproduction added yet another layer to the brutality of plantation life. Men like Pata Seca were selected for their physical attributes, considered ideal for fathering children who could grow into strong laborers, while enslaved women were coerced into bearing children under the scrutiny and control of their owners. The reproductive capacities of enslaved people were manipulated to meet economic needs, with little concern for the desires, autonomy, or well-being of those involved. Pata Seca's body became a tool in this system, and though the circumstances were cruel beyond comprehension, he sought to navigate them in ways that preserved dignity, knowledge, and care for the generations he produced. The plantation's goal was to maintain a continuous supply of labor. But within this oppressive framework, Pata Seca's influence on his children extended beyond mere survival. He taught them reading, strategy, and the resilience needed to endure and eventually resist a world designed to suppress them. The daily life of enslaved people on Brazilian plantations was a complex interplay of labor, survival, and subtle forms of resistance. Every sunrise brought the certainty of backbreaking work, while every moment in the fields was a reminder of the powerlessness imposed upon them. Yet even under these conditions, human ingenuity and spirit found ways to persist. Stories passed down through generations recount Pata Seca's efforts to instruct his children and guide them in ways that plantation overseers could not control, providing them with the tools to navigate the harsh realities of their world. Knowledge, taught quietly and subtly, became a form of empowerment, a counterbalance to the physical coercion that dominated every other aspect of their existence. Punishments were severe and arbitrary, reinforcing the constant tension between obedience and survival. Whippings, deprivation, and other forms of retribution were employed to maintain order, while any attempt at self-determination or rebellion was met with brutal consequences. Pata Seca, despite the immense pressures and dangers, managed to assert his agency in small but significant ways, whether through guiding his children, organizing acts of resistance, or protecting those within his care from the worst excesses of the plantation system. These acts of defiance, often quite unseen by outsiders, reveal the extraordinary resilience required to endure such a life and the ways in which enslaved people carved out spaces of humanity within a system designed to deny it entirely. Within this environment, the social structures imposed on enslaved people also shaped community and identity. Bonds were formed not only through bloodlines but through shared struggle, mutual protection, and collective knowledge. Quilombos and other fugitive communities became safe havens where the traditions, skills, and survival strategies taught by individuals like Pata Seca could flourish beyond the reach of plantation oversight, even as enslaved people were exploited for their labor and reproductive capacity. These communities preserved memory, culture, and strategies of resistance that would endure long after slavery's abolition. by situating Pata Seca's personal experiences within the broader realities of plantation life, brutal labor, insufficient food, family separation, and forced reproduction, we can begin to understand the extraordinary courage and resilience that defined his life. His story illustrates not only the cruelty of the Brazilian slave system, but also the enduring human capacity to adapt, survive, and influence future generations in the face of a system designed to reduce people to mere instruments of labor and reproduction. Pata Seca's life serves as a testament to the ways in which knowledge, care, and courage can persist, creating a legacy that transcends the oppression under which it was born. The name Pata Seca, which translates to dry foot in Portuguese, carried with it a mystique that mirrored the extraordinary life of Roque José Florencio, and its origins are as layered and compelling as the man himself. Some say the nickname came from his remarkable ability to walk barefoot across scorching fields without flinching, an almost superhuman endurance that seemed to defy both pain and the harsh conditions of the plantations where he labored, in the blazing heat of the São Paulo sun. The soil of the coffee and sugar fields could reach temperatures that would leave lesser men blistered and injured. Yet Pata Seca moved across the earth with a grace and resilience that inspired both awe and a hint of fear among those who observed him. This image of a man whose feet were impervious to pain became a symbol of his physical dominance, a trait that both marked him for exploitation and allowed him to assert a subtle autonomy within a life otherwise dictated by the will of his enslavers. Others suggest that the nickname referred to a peculiar skin condition that left his feet unusually dry, a minor physical detail that over time became emblematic of his identity in the oral histories preserved by his descendants. In a society that reduced individuals to laborers, breeders, or property, even a small physical characteristic could take on symbolic significance, serving as a marker that distinguished Pata Seca from others and contributed to the legend that grew around him. It is a testament to how identity and myth intertwined in the lives of enslaved people, where personal traits could be magnified, distorted, or celebrated in ways that reflected both reality and collective storytelling. Perhaps the most evocative interpretation of the name, however, lies in the idea that Pata Seca left no traces, moving in such a way that he could evade capture, surveillance, or control. In a life constrained by the oppressive structures of slavery, the ability to leave no evidence of one's movements was not merely a curiosity, it was a form of resistance, a subtle assertion of agency in an environment designed to monitor, confine, and exploit. Whether moving through the fields, navigating the boundaries of plantations, or later guiding his children and assisting those seeking refuge, the concept of leaving no trace resonates with the broader narrative of Pata Seca's life, a story in which survival, intelligence, and resilience coexisted alongside coercion and exploitation. The nickname thus becomes a symbol of both physical prowess and psychological acuity, a marker of someone who navigated a hostile world with ingenuity and care, even while forced into roles that sought to reduce him to a tool of labor and reproduction. The ambiguity surrounding the origin of the nickname also reflects the nature of historical memory, particularly in the context of slavery. Official records of enslaved people were sparse, often limited to sale transactions, birth or death notices, and the occasional mention in plantation ledgers, leaving vast gaps in the personal histories of those who endured bondage. In the absence of detailed documentation, oral tradition becomes the vessel through which stories are preserved, adapted, and sometimes mythologized. Pata Seca's name, carried through generations, embodies this dynamic. It is a story encoded in a moniker, one that conveys not only physical characteristics but also resilience, cunning, and the capacity to endure conditions designed to strip away humanity. Beyond its literal meanings, the nickname also speaks to the cultural and social environment in which Pata Seca lived. In a world where enslaved people were categorized, controlled, and commodified. Names, whether given by owners or adopted within communities, held weight, conveying information about status, ability, or reputation. To be recognized as Pata Seca was to be acknowledged for traits that made him exceptional, for a presence that could not be ignored despite the attempts of the plantation system to reduce him to an object of utility. It was a recognition of physical strength, endurance, and perhaps most importantly, an intangible quality that allowed him to navigate the brutal realities of life under slavery with a measure of autonomy and influence. In telling the story of Pata Seca, the meaning behind his nickname also provides a lens through which to understand his broader impact and legacy. Just as his physical abilities made him a key figure in the reproductive strategies imposed by plantation owners, his capacity to move, survive, and influence those around him allowed him to instill knowledge, resilience, and leadership in his children and the wider enslaved community, whether through teaching survival skills, organizing acts of subtle resistance, or fostering networks of kinship and protection. Pata Seca's life demonstrates that even within systems of extreme coercion, individuals could find ways to assert agency, preserve humanity, and create legacies that outlived the confines of the plantation. The legend of Pata Seca, carried in his name, intertwines with the tangible realities of his life, the hundreds of children he fathered, the brutal labor he endured, the family separations he witnessed, and the forced reproductive roles imposed upon him. Each interpretation of his nickname, walking barefoot without pain, possessing a unique skin condition, or leaving no trace, adds a layer of understanding to the complex man who navigated an impossible existence. In every sense, the name encapsulates the extraordinary balance of exploitation and resilience that defined his life, offering a symbol for the ways enslaved people could endure, adapt, and leave an enduring mark on history. By exploring the story behind Pata Seca, we gain insight into not just one man's extraordinary journey, but also the broader human experiences of endurance, adaptation, and subtle resistance under slavery. The nickname is more than a label. It is a narrative, a testament, and a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, individuals like Roque Josie Floto could find ways to assert presence, influence, and legacy, leaving traces that would be remembered and revered long after the plantations fell silent. In this way, Pata Seca's name continues to resonate as a symbol of resilience, resourcefulness, and the indomitable human spirit. Pata Seca's extraordinary life was shaped not only by the brutal conditions of Brazilian slavery, but also by the remarkable qualities he possessed. Qualities that distinguished him from his peers and allowed him to leave an enduring legacy despite the oppression that sought to reduce him to mere labor. Standing at a height that towered over most men of his time, his physical presence was immediately commanding, a living testament to strength and resilience forged through both genetics and the relentless demands of plantation life. Yet it was not merely his stature that set him apart. His strength was coupled with an intelligence and charisma that made him a natural leader among those around him, a person who could inspire, protect, and guide others even in circumstances where autonomy was systematically denied. Being exceptionally tall and strong afforded Pata Seca a degree of visibility that, paradoxically, made him both vulnerable and valuable within the oppressive framework of slavery. Plantation owners quickly recognized that such traits could be exploited, and they conscripted him into roles that leveraged his physical capabilities, including the coercive position of a breeding slave intended to perpetuate the labor force. While this assignment was a manifestation of dehumanization, Pata Seca's intelligence and courage enabled him to navigate the harsh expectations imposed upon him, turning the very attributes used to control him into instruments of subtle resistance and influence. He became a figure whose presence could not be ignored, someone who could command attention, inspire loyalty, and guide others in the face of extreme adversity. His intelligence was evident not only in his ability to endure and survive the physical demands of labor, but also in the strategic ways he engaged with the people and environment around him. Pata Seca demonstrated foresight, understanding the ways in which he could exert agency within the constraints of the plantation system, instructing his children and others in practical knowledge, survival skills, and even reading an act of empowerment in a world designed to suppress learning and critical thought among enslaved people. His cognitive acuity complemented his physical attributes, allowing him to become more than a tool of labor. He became a mentor, a guide, and a source of hope for those navigating the brutal conditions alongside him. Charisma played a crucial role in how Pata Seca influenced those around him, creating connections that transcended fear and coercion. Enslaved people gravitated toward him not merely because of his size or strength, but because of the warmth, leadership, and protective instincts that he exhibited in a society structured to isolate, control, and manipulate. His ability to build relationships, communicate effectively, and inspire cooperation was a form of resistance in itself, a means of fostering community and solidarity within an otherwise fragmented and oppressive environment. His presence became a source of reassurance, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, guidance, courage, and ingenuity could persist. Bravery, perhaps, was the most defining of Pata Seca's qualities, a trait that allowed him to endure the unimaginable and to act in ways that subtly undermined the control of his enslavers. Physical courage enabled him to confront dangers in the fields, during forced labor, and when navigating treacherous social hierarchies, while moral courage guided him in teaching, protecting, and supporting his children and the wider enslaved community. He demonstrated a willingness to act for the welfare of others despite the constant threat of punishment, showing that resilience is as much about ethical and emotional fortitude as it is about physical endurance. This bravery is woven through the stories passed down by descendants and local historians, reinforcing the image of a man who could confront hardship with both strength and wisdom. The interplay of these traits, height, strength, intelligence, charisma, and bravery, allowed Pata Seca to leave a profound imprint not only on his immediate family, but also on the larger enslaved community. His exceptional physicality made him a target for exploitation, yet his mental acuity and emotional intelligence allowed him to influence, protect, and educate those around him. In doing, he carved out spaces of empowerment and resistance within a system designed to strip away autonomy, turning his individuality into a beacon of resilience and continuity. He taught his children practical skills, survival strategies, and critical thinking, ensuring that the next generation could navigate a world that was hostile and unjust. And in this way, his qualities directly contributed to the preservation of culture, knowledge, and agency among his descendants. Pata Seca's life also illustrates the complex duality of being exceptional within an oppressive system. His gifts made him highly visible and therefore subject to coercion. Yet these same qualities enabled him to transcend the limitations imposed upon him. Each act of instruction, guidance, or protection he undertook leveraged his unique combination of traits, turning the mechanisms of oppression into opportunities for fostering resilience, knowledge, and community. His story reflects the broader human capacity to transform disadvantage into strength, to wield innate qualities in service of both survival and legacy, and to maintain dignity and influence even when subjected to systematic attempts to dehumanize. By understanding the holistic nature of Pata Seca's attributes, we gain insight into how extraordinary individuals can shape their world despite extreme adversity. His height and strength, combined with intelligence, charisma, and bravery, made him a figure capable of profound influence, allowing him to navigate the brutality of slavery while nurturing skills, courage, and resilience in others. In telling his story, we recognize not only the oppression he endured but also the remarkable ways in which he asserted agency, preserved knowledge, and created a legacy that continues to inspire, demonstrating that human potential can persist even under the most dehumanizing circumstances. Even under the crushing weight of oppression and the constant surveillance of plantation overseers, Pata Seca managed to assert moments of defiance that spoke to both his courage and his strategic intelligence, using his extraordinary physical and mental attributes to influence events and protect those around him. The life of a breeding slave was designed to strip individuals of autonomy, to reduce them to instruments of labor and reproduction. Yet Pata Seca's story reveals the subtle and powerful ways one person could resist such an oppressive system. He became a central figure not only within the enslaved community of his plantation, but also in the broader network of fugitive communities known as quilombos, spaces where escaped enslaved people could live, cultivate land, and preserve traditions in relative freedom. These communities were a form of resistance in themselves, demonstrating that even under a society designed to exploit and suppress, enslaved Africans could reclaim agency, organize collectively, and sustain cultural and social structures outside the control of their captors. Pata Seca's participation in these acts of rebellion and escape was deeply informed by his unique position. His exceptional height and strength made him formidable in physical confrontations, while his intelligence allowed him to plan, coordinate, and inspire others in ways that were subtle enough to evade the constant surveillance of plantation authorities. These traits were not merely incidental. They were essential to his ability to navigate the perilous dynamics of slave resistance, where a single misstep could result in brutal punishment or death. Despite the inherent risks, he consistently took actions that facilitated the flight of others, guiding individuals and families to safety and providing the support necessary to survive in new, unregulated environments. In doing, he became both a protector and a mentor, someone whose presence offered hope and a tangible path to liberation in a world designed to deny it. The quilombos themselves were remarkable expressions of resilience and strategic ingenuity, often located in remote or inaccessible regions to minimize the likelihood of recapture. Within these settlements, the knowledge and skills imparted by leaders like Pata Seca were invaluable. He taught survival techniques, strategies for evading capture, and practical knowledge for sustaining life outside the control of the plantation system. His guidance extended beyond mere physical survival. He instructed in matters of leadership, community organization, and the subtle art of navigating a society structured against them. These lessons allowed fugitive communities to thrive despite being constantly threatened by the military and political apparatus of the time, demonstrating that resistance was not only about confrontation but also about preservation, strategy, and the careful cultivation of autonomy. The rebellions that Pata Seca led or participated in were often localized and tactical, yet their significance extended far beyond immediate skirmishes. They disrupted the plantation economy, challenged the authority of slaveholders, and reinforced the notion that enslaved people were capable of self-determination, organization, and coordinated action. Oral histories and descendant accounts suggest that Pata Seca's leadership in these events was both courageous and strategic, balancing the need for secrecy with the imperative to protect and mobilize those under his influence. Even where written documentation is scarce, the consistency of these stories across generations speaks to the profound impact he had on the communities around him, highlighting how personal qualities can amplify the effects of resistance even under extreme oppression. Moreover, his actions illustrate the broader social and moral dimensions of resistance within enslaved populations. Pata Seca's interventions were motivated not only by a desire for personal freedom, but by a deep commitment to the welfare and empowerment of others. Guiding enslaved people to quilombos was a life or death endeavor, often requiring courage to confront patrols, strategic thinking to evade capture, and compassion to support those fleeing from unimaginable conditions. His ability to combine physical prowess with moral courage and intellectual acumen enabled him to act decisively in ways that benefited entire communities, ensuring that knowledge, skills, and hope could persist despite the systematic efforts to extinguish them. The environment in which Pata Seca operated was fraught with danger. Plantation owners employed violent measures to prevent uprisings, including whippings, imprisonment, and execution, and the threat of betrayal within the enslaved population itself was a constant reality. Yet even under such extreme conditions, he navigated the complexities of trust, timing, and strategy to effect meaningful change, creating opportunities for escape, rebellion, and empowerment that would ripple through generations. His ability to understand both human nature and the structural vulnerabilities of the system allowed him to exploit openings where others might have seen only risk, turning the very mechanisms of control into avenues for liberation. Importantly, Pata Seca's efforts were not solitary. They were part of a continuum of resistance that connected individual acts of courage to collective movements. The Quilombos served as hubs for education, cultural preservation, and coordinated defense, providing a framework in which the lessons he imparted could be expanded upon, shared, and sustained. By participating in and sometimes leading these initiatives, he ensured that the knowledge, resilience, and moral strength he embodied were transmitted beyond his immediate circle, contributing to the long-term survival and empowerment of the broader enslaved population. Through his life, Pata Seca exemplifies how resistance under slavery was multi-dimensional, blending physical courage, strategic intelligence, moral conviction, and social influence. His ability to facilitate escape, mentor fledgling leaders, and protect communities highlights the ways in which one individual's extraordinary qualities can shape the lives of many, turning oppression into an opportunity for leadership and empowerment. By examining his actions in the context of rebellions and Quilombo participation, we gain a richer understanding of both the brutality of slavery and the remarkable resilience, ingenuity, and humanity that persisted within enslaved communities, offering lessons about courage, strategy, and the enduring power of collective resistance. Pata Seca's influence extended far beyond his own survival and immediate acts of resistance, reaching deeply into the lives of his children, whom he nurtured with a vision that transcended the brutality of their world, instilling in them not only practical skills but also a profound sense of agency, resilience, and leadership that would echo across generations. In a society designed to strip enslaved people of knowledge, autonomy, and self-determination, he recognized that education, even in its most basic forms, was a form of empowerment, a subtle yet powerful tool that could equip his children to navigate, survive, and ultimately challenge the structures that sought to control them. He taught them to read, a skill often forbidden or severely restricted among the enslaved, understanding that literacy was a gateway to information, strategy, and self-expression, enabling them to communicate, interpret, and preserve knowledge that would otherwise be denied to them. Through the act of teaching reading, Pata Seca not only provided his children with practical capabilities but also instilled in them a sense of dignity and intellectual autonomy, laying the groundwork for leadership that could thrive even under oppression. Beyond literacy, Pata Seca emphasized the cultivation of physical skills essential for survival in a perilous and exploitative environment. Fighting was not merely an exercise in strength or aggression but a necessary preparation for the harsh realities of plantation life, the potential confrontations with overseers, and the dangers faced by those seeking freedom. Through rigorous training and guidance, he ensured that his children could protect themselves and others, developing confidence, discipline, and resilience that would serve them both in daily survival and in acts of organized resistance. This focus on physical preparedness was intimately tied to his understanding of power, agency, and the capacity to assert oneself even within a system intent on domination and dehumanization. Survival skills, the third pillar of his teachings, were equally critical. Pata Seca imparted knowledge about navigating the natural and social landscapes of their world, instructing his children on how to forage, cultivate, and sustain life in both constrained and liberated spaces, including the Quilambos where fugitive communities could establish autonomy. He shared wisdom about observation, strategy, and adaptability, ensuring that they could recognize threats, seize opportunities, and maintain resilience in the face of systemic oppression and unpredictable hazards. These skills were not only about immediate physical survival, but also about cultivating foresight, judgment, and the ability to make critical decisions under pressure, traits essential for leaders within enslaved and freed communities alike. In teaching these skills, Pata Seca effectively prepared his children to assume leadership roles, both within their family and within the broader networks of enslaved and fugitive communities. His mentorship fostered a sense of responsibility, moral courage, and strategic thinking, encouraging them to step beyond mere endurance and embrace active engagement in shaping their circumstances. By equipping them with literacy, combat training, and survival knowledge, he ensured that they could not only navigate oppression, but also challenge it. Guiding others, organizing resistance, and preserving cultural and practical knowledge that could survive generations of hardship and displacement. His approach demonstrates a keen understanding of leadership as both skill and vision. Integrating intellectual, physical, and ethical dimensions in a manner that prepared his progeny for a world that would remain dangerous, unjust, and unpredictable for decades. Moreover, Pata Seca's teachings were deeply rooted in the values of resilience, ingenuity, and communal responsibility. He understood that leadership was inseparable from the capacity to care for others, to foster solidarity, and to transmit knowledge that would strengthen the broader community. In instructing his children, he not only prepared them to survive and resist but also to become pillars of support, guidance, and protection for peers and extended family members. This emphasis on intergenerational empowerment reinforced social cohesion within enslaved populations, allowing knowledge and strategies for survival to be preserved, adapted, and expanded over time, ensuring continuity in the face of systematic attempts to erase autonomy, culture, and agency. The impact of Pata Seca's mentorship can also be seen in the stories of his descendants, who recount the ways in which his teachings shaped not only their practical skills, but also their sense of identity, pride, and responsibility. Through reading, fighting, and survival training, his children acquired tools that enabled them to navigate life with a sense of agency, to resist exploitation in nuanced ways, and to participate in the protection and empowerment of their communities. This education created a ripple effect, extending the influence of his wisdom, courage, and strategic thinking far beyond the immediate circle of his family, embedding lessons that would resonate across multiple generations and geographic spaces. Importantly, Pata Seca's approach reflects a sophisticated understanding of how knowledge and skill could function as instruments of liberation within a system designed to suppress human potential. By investing in his children's development, he ensured that even as the forces of oppression sought to reduce them to labor or breeding stock, they would possess the intellectual, physical, and ethical capacities necessary to navigate, survive, and ultimately challenge their circumstances. The integration of reading, fighting, and survival skills demonstrates his holistic vision of empowerment, recognizing that true resilience requires strength of body, clarity of mind, and depth of moral courage. In essence, Pata Seca's mentorship exemplifies how extraordinary individuals could cultivate leadership and resistance even under the most restrictive conditions. His deliberate and multifaceted instruction prepared his children not merely to endure oppression, but to become active participants in shaping their destinies. Supporting communities and sustaining the cultural, ethical, and practical knowledge that slavery sought to obliterate. Through this deliberate cultivation of skills and values, he ensured that his legacy would endure, providing a foundation for resilience, agency, and empowerment that extended well beyond his own lifetime, illuminating the enduring capacity of human ingenuity and courage in the face of profound adversity. In the midst of a life defined by oppression, forced labor, and the cruel expectations of the plantation system, Pata Seca found a measure of personal solace and profound connection when he met Palmyra, a woman whose own strengths and virtues complemented his in ways that transformed the contours of his existence and those of his family. Unlike the women forced into the breeding system, Palmyra entered his life as a partner by choice, and together they created a household that represented a sanctuary of care, love, and resilience amid the surrounding hardships. Their union produced 9 children, a number far smaller than the staggering figures associated with the coercive breeding practices. Yet each child was nurtured with intention, guidance, and affection, embodying the human capacity to reclaim agency, family, and dignity even in the shadow of systemic dehumanization. Palmyra herself was a healer, a figure of remarkable skill and compassion who tended to the sick and injured members of both their immediate family and the broader community, offering care that was both practical and deeply restorative, reinforcing social bonds and providing a form of resistance through preservation of life and health. Together, Pata Seca and Palmyra cultivated an environment in which knowledge, care, and resilience could flourish. While Pata Seca imparted reading, fighting, and survival skills to his children, Palmyra ensured that the well-being of each child and family member was nurtured, teaching lessons of empathy, patience, and practical care that were essential in a society where neglect and cruelty were commonplace. Her skills as a healer were invaluable, not only for addressing illnesses and injuries but also for maintaining a sense of normalcy, dignity, and safety in daily life, providing remedies derived from local knowledge, herbal practices, and learned techniques that bridged the gap between survival and thriving. Within this domestic sphere, their children witnessed a model of leadership and partnership grounded in mutual respect, skill, and moral integrity, contrasting sharply with the exploitative relationships imposed by the plantation system. The significance of this partnership extends beyond the immediate family. In a society where enslaved people were routinely separated, dehumanized, and deprived of the ability to form stable family units, the union of Pata Seca and Palmyra represents a conscious assertion of autonomy, love, and social cohesion. Their household became a microcosm of resistance, demonstrating that even under conditions designed to fracture relationships and deny dignity, people could create meaningful, supportive, and productive lives. Palmyra's healing work reinforced this resistance by preserving health and life, allowing individuals to maintain strength, resilience, and the ability to participate in broader acts of communal survival, whether through labor, cultural preservation, or organized resistance. Their family life also illustrated the integration of practical skills and moral instruction, combining Pata Seca's mentorship in survival, literacy, and self-defense with Palmyra's guidance in nurturing, healing, and ethical conduct. Children raised in this environment were uniquely prepared to navigate the complexities of a society that sought to oppress them, equipped not only with the physical and cognitive tools for survival but also with emotional intelligence, empathy, and the knowledge that care and solidarity were acts of strength. In this way, their household became a model for how enslaved people could cultivate agency, leadership, and resilience, blending personal, familial, and communal strategies to confront systemic challenges. The role of Palmyra as a healer extended beyond her immediate family, touching the lives of other enslaved and free individuals who relied on her expertise. Her ability to provide care created networks of mutual support, ensuring that health and vitality could be maintained even in environments of scarcity and exploitation. In doing, she reinforced social cohesion, contributed to the stability of fledgling communities, and demonstrated that acts of care and skill were themselves forms of resistance, preserving the human capital necessary for survival, escape, and organized action. The combination of her expertise and Pata Seca's leadership created a powerful synergy that nurtured both physical survival and social resilience, ensuring that their children and those around them could thrive despite systemic adversity. Moreover, the children of Pata Seca and Palmyra benefited from a dual legacy: the inherited physical and intellectual traits of their father and the practical, ethical, and healing knowledge of their mother. This fusion of skills and values prepared them to assume roles of leadership, advocacy, and mentorship within their communities, continuing the cycle of guidance, protection, and empowerment that had been central to their upbringing. Each lesson learned from Pata Seca's emphasis on strategy, survival, and literacy, combined with Palmyra's teachings in care, healing, and moral responsibility, reinforced the interconnected nature of resilience, demonstrating that enduring influence arises from a combination of strength, intellect, empathy, and ethical commitment. The story of Pata Seca and Palmyra also illustrates the broader human capacity to cultivate family, community, and cultural continuity under the most adverse conditions. Their household was a haven in which knowledge, care, and resistance were intentionally cultivated, creating spaces of autonomy, protection, and learning that were scarce in the wider society. By deliberately choosing to live as a family unit grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose, they challenged the oppressive forces surrounding them, asserting that dignity, education, and human connection could be preserved even when systematically denied. Ultimately, the union of Pata Seca and Palmyra, and the 9 children they raised together, represents a powerful testament to resilience, agency, and the strategic use of both physical and social skills to foster survival and empowerment. Their story weaves together the strands of resistance, care, and legacy, showing that even in a system designed to diminish human potential, intentional partnerships, education, and nurturing could create lasting impact, equipping the next generation to lead, protect, and carry forward the lessons of courage, intelligence, and compassion. Through their lives, we see how love, skill, and deliberate mentorship can transform the shadow of oppression into a foundation for enduring strength, community, and hope. Pata Seca's life spanned an extraordinary arc of history, encompassing some of the most profound transformations Brazil would undergo, and his longevity, reported at an astonishing 130 years, afforded him a unique perspective on the seismic shifts that defined both his personal world and the nation at large, allowing him to witness the slow, often painful evolution from a society rooted in slavery to one striving, imperfectly, toward modernity and national identity. Born into the cruelest constraints of forced labor and systemic exploitation, he first experienced life as an enslaved man, compelled to work, reproduce, and endure dehumanizing treatment that sought to reduce him and his contemporaries to mere commodities. Yet even in those circumstances he cultivated resilience, intelligence, and leadership that would define his enduring legacy. By the time Brazil abolished slavery in 1888, he had already lived through decades of brutal plantation life, personal sacrifice, and the creation of kinship networks that allowed both survival and subtle forms of resistance. And he would see that monumental societal shift not merely as a distant political event, but as a deeply personal liberation, one that validated the sacrifices, resilience, and resistance of himself, his children, and countless other enslaved people whose labor had fueled the nation for generations. The following year, 1889, brought further upheaval and transformation with the establishment of the Brazilian Republic, ending the monarchy that had maintained many of the legal and economic structures underpinning slavery. Pata Seca, already a man of experience and strategic understanding of human and social dynamics, witnessed firsthand the tensions, conflicts, and uncertainties that accompanied the shift from imperial rule to republican governance. Observing the oscillation between reform and retrenchment, freedom and continued inequality, in this new political landscape, he could assess the limits of liberation while noting the potential for empowerment. Recognizing that the mere abolition of legal slavery did not automatically translate into economic, social, or cultural equality, and that survival, resilience, and leadership remained critical skills even in a society no longer legally defined by bondage. Beyond political changes, Pata Seca's lifetime encompassed global and regional conflicts that shaped Brazil's identity and its relations with neighboring countries, including wars that devastated populations and economies, tested national infrastructures, and reshaped collective consciousness. He lived through the Paraguayan War, or War of the Triple Alliance, witnessing the staggering human cost, the transformation of military strategies, and the effects of global geopolitics on local lives. Observing such events from his unique vantage point, he could draw connections between large-scale social upheavals and the everyday struggles he had known, understanding that resilience and foresight were critical not only for individual survival, but also for navigating broader social currents that could determine the fates of families, communities, and entire regions. Social changes and modernization further characterized the decades of his extended life, as Brazil shifted from a plantation-based economy to one increasingly involved in global trade, urbanization, and industrial development. Pata Seca would have witnessed the rise of coffee exportation as a central economic driver, the transformation of cities, and the migration patterns of both formerly enslaved and free populations seeking new opportunities in an evolving society. Within these transitions, he observed the juxtaposition of wealth and exploitation, freedom and marginalization, noting that the struggle for dignity, security, and agency persisted even after the formal structures of slavery had been dismantled. His long life allowed him to perceive not only the historical continuity of oppression and resistance, but also the emergence of new social possibilities. Technological advancements and cultural expressions that signaled both hope and ongoing challenges. Importantly, Pata Seca's longevity gave him the opportunity to transmit memory, knowledge, and wisdom across generations, serving as a living repository of history that bridged the past and the present. His descendants and community members were able to learn from his recollections, strategies, and experiences, absorbing lessons about leadership, survival, resistance, and ethical conduct that were anchored in lived reality rather than abstract narrative. Through storytelling, mentorship, and daily example, he ensured that the knowledge accumulated over more than a century of personal and communal struggle could inform, empower, and guide those who followed. Preserving cultural, strategic, and ethical legacies that formal records often ignored or erased. Despite the challenges of age, Pata Seca maintained involvement in his family and community, witnessing his children, grandchildren, and extended kin navigate a post-slavery society while applying the lessons he had imparted. His continued presence offered stability and continuity, anchoring a lineage shaped by both forced exploitation and intentional cultivation of knowledge. Resilience and leadership. The sheer span of his life allowed him to contextualize contemporary struggles within a longer historical arc, reinforcing the importance of historical awareness. Strategic thinking and moral courage in confronting systemic challenges that persisted despite formal emancipation. Even as the nation modernized, Pata Seca retained his connection to the landscapes, traditions, and communities that had shaped him, serving as a living witness to both the traumas of slavery and the potential for human endurance. Creativity and moral agency. His life embodied the interplay of suffering and empowerment, demonstrating how one individual could survive, resist, teach, and guide across multiple generations. Political regimes and social transformations, offering a tangible model of resilience, foresight, and leadership that transcended the immediate circumstances of any single historical moment. In essence, Pata Seca's longevity and experiences reflect the profound capacity of human beings to endure, adapt, and shape their destinies even amid systemic oppression. Political upheaval and societal transformation. By living through slavery's abolition, the rise of the Brazilian Republic, regional wars, and waves of modernization, he not only witnessed history but actively transmitted its lessons, bridging the past and the future while empowering his descendants and community to navigate a complex and changing world. His story stands as a testament to resilience, wisdom, and the enduring impact of individual agency in shaping both familial and collective legacies, reminding us that history is not only recorded in documents but lived, remembered, and passed on through the courage, skill, and insight of remarkable individuals who persevere against extraordinary odds. The legacy of Pata Seca endures not merely through the historical record or scattered documents, but, most vividly, through the memories and dedication of his descendants, who have taken it upon themselves to preserve and transmit the story of his extraordinary life to future generations, ensuring that his experiences, struggles, and triumphs are neither forgotten nor diminished by the passage of time. Among these descendants, Maria Magdalena Florencio stands as a particularly dedicated guardian of memory, committed to maintaining the tangible and intangible traces of her grandfather's remarkable journey through one of the most oppressive periods in Brazilian history, through her careful stewardship of photographs. Family memorabilia, oral histories, and first-hand accounts passed down through generations. She constructs a narrative bridge that connects the distant past of slavery, resistance, and survival with the present, providing a living archive that conveys not only facts but also the human essence of the man who lived through so much, endured so much, and ultimately shaped the lives of hundreds of children, families, and local communities. Magdalena's role is essential in contextualizing Pata Seca's story within the broader social and historical landscape, transforming abstract historical events into a vivid, human-centered account that resonates with contemporary audiences. Her preservation of photographs, for instance, allows observers to see the face of a man who was at once ordinary in his human needs and extraordinary in his physical strength, intelligence, and resilience. Each image she safeguards is more than a visual record. It is a portal into a life marked by both suffering and agency, a way to convey the dignity, complexity, and enduring spirit of someone who was deliberately dehumanized by the social structures around him, but refused to be defined solely by oppression. Through these photographs, viewers can connect with the humanity of Pata Seca, bridging the gap between historical abstraction and lived reality, enabling an emotional and intellectual engagement with the narrative that statistics and documents alone cannot achieve. Alongside these visual records, Magdalena meticulously curates memorabilia associated with her grandfather's life, from objects as simple as household keys and a worn nail to symbolic artifacts tied to family traditions. Personal achievements, or moments of historical significance. Each item serves as a tangible anchor for storytelling, offering touchpoints that make the past more immediate, relatable, and instructive for those seeking to understand not just the events of Pata Seca's life, but the conditions, choices, and resilience that defined it. The careful preservation of these items demonstrates the interplay between material culture and memory, highlighting how objects can convey histories that may be absent from official archives while simultaneously offering intimate insights into daily life. Personal priorities, and the moral and social frameworks that guided him. Oral histories, maintained through repeated storytelling and intergenerational transmission, form the backbone of the memory network that Magdalena and her family cultivate. In a society that historically marginalized and dehumanized Black individuals, formal documentation of lives like Pata Seca's was often non-existent or deliberately suppressed, making oral histories indispensable for reconstructing authentic experiences through narrative repetition, reflection, and interpretation. These stories preserve not only factual details but also the emotional, ethical, and relational dimensions of Pata Seca's life, including his courage, strategic thinking, mentorship of his children, and acts of resistance against oppressive structures. By listening, retelling, and elaborating upon these narratives, Magdalena ensures that the lessons embedded in her grandfather's experiences resilience, leadership, care for family, and strategic navigation of an unjust world remain vibrant and actionable for present and future generations. The impact of this preservation extends beyond the immediate family to the broader community, where Pata Seca's life continues to inspire recognition of historical injustices, communal resilience, and the importance of cultural continuity. Local residents and community members, informed by the narratives and artifacts that Magdalena maintains, gain a richer understanding of the history that shaped their environment, the enduring legacies of enslaved individuals, and the ways in which personal and communal agency intersected with systemic oppression. These preserved memories illuminate the complex social networks, strategies of survival, and leadership roles that Pata Seca embodied, highlighting that his influence was not confined to his own household, but radiated outward, shaping the social and moral landscape of multiple generations. By linking photographs, oral testimonies, and personal memorabilia, Magdalena constructs a multidimensional portrait of Pata Seca that transcends conventional historical documentation, offering insights into his physical presence, his emotional and ethical priorities, and his enduring influence on local culture and community cohesion. Her efforts demonstrate that memory is not static, it is active, performative, and relational, requiring deliberate attention, care, and narrative framing to convey lessons effectively across time. This active curation ensures that Pata Seca's life continues to educate, inspire, and provoke reflection on resilience, justice, and the ongoing struggle for dignity in societies shaped by legacies of oppression. Moreover, through her commitment, Magdalena highlights the importance of intergenerational responsibility in preserving history. showing that descendants play a critical role in maintaining the visibility of marginalized narratives that might otherwise be erased. In doing, she bridges past and present, connecting the lived experiences of her grandfather with contemporary struggles for recognition, equity, and human dignity, and she creates opportunities for dialogue, learning, and communal reflection that honor the sacrifices, courage, and enduring influence of Pata Seca. Ultimately, the work of Maria Magdalena Florencio and other descendants demonstrates that history is alive, not only in archives or textbooks but in the people who remember, the artifacts they protect, and the stories they tell. Through their dedication, the extraordinary life of Pata Seca's resistance, mentorship, resilience, and love is rendered accessible, comprehensible, and inspiring, offering a model for how individual agency, family stewardship, and communal memory can preserve lessons of courage, perseverance, and moral integrity that continue to resonate across generations, ensuring that the legacy of this remarkable man remains a living, influential force in shaping understanding and inspiring action within both local and wider historical consciousness. As we reach the conclusion of Pata Seca's extraordinary story, it becomes clear that his life is far more than a collection of astonishing facts or an anecdote from a distant past. It is a profound testament to the enduring human spirit and the complex interplay between oppression, resistance, and legacy. From the moment of his birth into the brutal system of Brazilian slavery, he was thrust into circumstances designed to strip him of autonomy, dignity, and even the ability to form meaningful familial bonds. Yet throughout his life, he consistently demonstrated remarkable resilience, intelligence, and courage, defying the limitations imposed upon him by a society intent on exploiting and dehumanizing him. The sheer scale of his forced reproductive labor, the hundreds of children he fathered, and the relentless physical and emotional demands placed upon him would have crushed many. Yet he persevered, not simply to survive, but to shape the lives of those around him, to instill skills, knowledge, and values that would enable future generations to resist oppression and claim agency over their own destinies. Pata Seca's story illustrates the unimaginable cruelty embedded within slavery, revealing how a system could commodify human life, determining worth based solely on physical strength, reproductive capacity, or labor potential. And yet, within this framework of dehumanization, he exemplifies the resilience, creativity, and courage that allowed enslaved people to retain a sense of self, build communities, and preserve cultural continuity. His life reminds us that even in the darkest corners of human history, where systemic injustice seeks to erase individuality and dignity, human beings can and do find ways to resist, to assert their identity, and to cultivate the tools needed to protect, nurture, and empower those around them. The Quilombos, the teachings he passed to his children, and the leadership he exhibited in subtle and overt acts of resistance all demonstrate that resilience is not passive endurance. It is active engagement, strategic thinking, and moral courage exercised even under the most oppressive conditions. The legacy of Pata Seca extends far beyond the individuals he directly influenced, offering enduring lessons for us today. It underscores the vital importance of documenting, remembering, and honoring the lives of those who suffered under systems of oppression, not only to preserve historical truth but also to inform contemporary understanding of justice, human rights, and social responsibility. By learning about his life, we gain insights into how communities can survive and even thrive despite systemic adversity, how cultural and familial transmission of knowledge strengthens collective resilience, and how individual courage can ripple across generations, shaping the values, strategies, and identities of descendants and broader communities alike. Moreover, Pata Seca's experiences illustrate the duality of human existence under oppression. While slavery sought to reduce people to mere tools of labor and reproduction, the human spirit proved capable of immense creativity, resourcefulness, and agency. His intelligence, charisma, and leadership transformed him from a mere object of exploitation into a figure of inspiration and guidance, not only for his immediate family but for the larger enslaved community that benefited from his guidance and protection. By teaching his children to read, fight, and survive, by participating in rebellions, and by helping others escape to safe communities, he embodied a philosophy of resilience that combined practical skills with moral and ethical instruction, demonstrating that resistance can take many forms, from the subtle to the overt, from daily survival to organized collective action. As we reflect on his long life, spanning eras of monumental change including the abolition of slavery, the rise of the Brazilian Republic, wars, and societal modernization, it is evident that Pata Seca not only survived extraordinary adversity but also contributed to the shaping of his world, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire descendants, historians, and anyone committed to understanding the complex histories of enslaved people and their contributions to society. The physical and emotional burdens he endured, the family he nurtured, and the communities he influenced all stand as testament to his enduring impact, reminding us that even in circumstances designed to diminish humanity, courage, intelligence, and care can flourish, leaving lasting imprints on both human hearts and historical memory. Through the dedication of his descendants, particularly Maria Magdalena Florencio, who preserves his memory through photographs, oral histories, and treasured memorabilia, Pata Seca's life continues to resonate, offering a window into the lived reality of slavery, the strategies of resistance employed by those subjected to it, and the lasting significance of family, community, and cultural memory in sustaining identity and resilience. His story challenges us to confront the brutal truths of history while simultaneously celebrating the power of human endurance, the importance of education and mentorship, and the ways in which ordinary individuals can leave extraordinary legacies through courage, care, and moral fortitude. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to learn about the incredible life of Pata Seca, a man whose story embodies resilience, resistance, and the power of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable cruelty. If you found this story inspiring, informative, and moving, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with friends and family so that more people can discover this remarkable history that is often overlooked. Your support helps us continue to shed light on untold stories and preserve the legacies of extraordinary individuals who shaped communities and challenged injustice. From all of us here, we wish you a peaceful and restful night, filled with reflection, gratitude, and the courage to honor the lessons of the past as you face each day ahead. Good night, and may the resilience and wisdom of those who came before us inspire you in every aspect of your life.